July 18, 2025, a barrage of 12 hypersonic cruise missiles and more than 20 electronic warfare drones launched from the Chinese aircraft carrier Luoyang-01 hurtling toward the USS Gerald R. Ford, a 100,000-ton $13.5 billion symbol of American maritime supremacy. This was more than an attack. It was a statement, a direct assault on the heart of America's military presence along one of the most strategically important SEAL lanes in the Pacific. The enemy thought they could blind America, disorient America, disrupt America. But what followed was not a defense. It was a counteroffensive defined by discipline, devastation, and precision. A lesson in modern warfare that will reverberate across every ocean and into the battle room of every major military command on Earth. This is the untold story of how the United States survived the first direct carrier strike of the 21st century and responded with unmatched firepower, silence, and determination. Subscribe and follow along as we reveal what really happened when the Ford was attacked and why the enemy lost the battle in the first second. Join me as we find out. At exactly 4:16 a.m. on July 18, 2025, the calm waters of the Philippine Sea shattered under the roar of war from the shadow of the Chinese aircraft carrier Luoyang-01 121 combat drones equipped with electronic warfare devices and decoy flares were launched, followed by 12 YJ-21E supersonic cruise missiles, each flying at speeds exceeding Mach 5. Moments later, they soared into the sky like a swarm of metal. Their target was not just any vessel. It was the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced and expensive warship ever built. A $13.5 billion 100,000-ton floating fortress sailing under the stars just 217 nautical miles east of Taiwan. The attack was not a warning. It was a challenge, a provocation. And for the first time in over 4 decades, a U.S. aircraft carrier was under direct enemy fire. Inside the Ford's Combat Information Center, red lights flooded the space as sirens pierced the silence. Radar screens bloomed with hostile signatures, some streaking from high altitude, others skimming low across the waves like ghosts. Within seconds, 2 explosions rocked the ship. One missile detonated just 90 yards off the port bow, the shock waves slamming against the steel like a sledgehammer. The second, a low-flying drone self-destructed mid-approach, scattering debris across the sea surface. There was no hull breach, no fire, but the message was unmistakable. As one officer would later say, no one spoke it out loud, but we all knew this wasn't a drill. And just like that, the balance in the Pacific shifted. For years, China had postured, but this time it crossed the line. The attack lasted just 92 seconds. But what followed would send shock waves through every military command on Earth. The world had just witnessed the first direct carrier-to-carrier strike of the 21st century. And the U.S. was about to answer with fury. As the shock wave rippled across the deck, the USS Gerald R. Ford sprang into action with the precision of a living weapon. There was no panic, just movement. Years of training condensed into seconds. From the outer ring, the USS Thomas Hudner, a guided missile destroyer in Ford's escort group, activated its Aegis combat system. In less than 14 seconds, 5 SM-6 interceptors roared skyward, spiraling in staggered spirals. 3 of the enemy missiles were intercepted at 41,000 feet, exploding in silent clouds of fire and shrapnel. But the battle was not over. It was changing. At 15 nautical miles away, the second layer began to burn. Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, ESSM, were launched in pairs from the Ford's vertical launch tubes, targeting the drones maneuvering erratically just above sea level. The sky was ablaze with orange flares as 8 of the UAVs were destroyed mid-turn, their wrecks falling into the waves below. One UAV flying just 19 feet above sea level barely missed the port side of the carrier for a few seconds before it was vaporized. Then came the final frontier, the final wall between order and chaos. From either side of the Ford, the close-in weapon system CIWS roared. 2 6-barreled Gatling guns fired 4,500 tungsten rounds per minute, turning the sea air into a firestorm. One drone, undetected until the last second, pierced the crowd, hurtling toward the flight deck at more than 400 meters per. The plane was destroyed just 210 yards away. The explosion was so close it shook the bolts on the flight deck. Below, sailors in fireproof suits stood ready. No one faltered. No one moved aimlessly. Despite 33 aerial threats, no Americans were killed, no aircraft damaged, no breaches, no fires, just determination. The Chinese attack was underway, but not yet successful. Now they will feel the wrath of the United States before witnessing this momentous moment. Tell me where in the world you are watching the video from. By 4:23 a.m., just 7 minutes after the last interceptor launched, the USS Gerald R. Ford wasn't just defending anymore. It was on offense. The command deck fell into a new rhythm. Quiet, deliberate, strategic. Above the carrier, a Northrop Grumman E-2D Hawkeye banked hard into a wide orbit, climbing to 32,000 feet. Its radar dish, spinning like a silent guardian, began stitching together the chaos. Within 90 seconds, full situational awareness was re-established. The electromagnetic fog that once blinded the fleet began to lift. Drone debris fell, jamming signals faded, and one truth emerged. The attack hadn't come from mainland China. It had been launched directly from the aircraft carrier Luoyang-01, now repositioning 217 nautical miles southeast of Taiwan. Simultaneously, two EA-18G Growlers, already airborne, were rerouted toward the southern corridor. Their mission, electromagnetic retaliation. Bursts of jamming pulses were sent across the exact same frequencies the Chinese UAVs had used minutes earlier. In response, 6 hostile drones still loitering in the battlespace lost contact and spiraled into the sea. Dead weight crashing silently into the waves. In the CIC, Commander Rachel Dean, head of electronic warfare operations, stood stone-faced over the digital operations board. She watched in real time as Luoyang-01's radar footprint flickered and reappeared. A signature previously masked now visible. That wasn't an accident, she said. They wanted us blind. They wanted us hit, but they had failed. And now the balance had shifted. Data streamed from Navy satellites and MQ-4C Trident surveillance drones confirmed the worst. Luoyang-01 had deployed the first carrier-to-carrier strike of the 21st century and was now attempting to retreat into contested waters. For the Pentagon, it wasn't just a hostile act. It was an act of war. And for every sailor aboard the USS Ford, the mission had changed. At exactly 1440 hours local time, the Pacific didn't roar. It went silent. For 32 minutes, the sea east of Taiwan lay still, the only movement coming from altitude. 4 B-1B Lancer bombers, each traveling at 36,000 feet under radio silence and guarded by a protective shield of EA-18G Growlers from a classified forward base in Guam. They had launched at 11:20 a.m. tanked midair by KC-46 Pegasus refuelers and flown a looping arc to avoid early detection. Their mission was not symbolic. It was surgical. Inside their payload bays, 8 AGM-183 ARRW hypersonic glide missiles, each capable of traveling over Mach 7, guided by satellite-fed targeting data with a kinetic impact force equivalent to 2,000 pounds of TNT per strike. The target was clear: the Chinese aircraft carrier Luoyang-01, now holding position near the northern edge of the Bashi Channel, surrounded by 2 Type ZOT-5 destroyers and a web of radar jammers. But the U.S. strike wasn't blind. Just minutes earlier, a stealth MQ-25 Stingray drone cloaked in sea clutter at 400 feet altitude transmitted final telemetry from 43 miles offshore. Its onboard sensors had triangulated Luoyang-01's heat signature and flight deck orientation. It marked the ship's ammunition magazine under deck and vanished into radio silence. Then came the order. At 144,132, 2 Lancers simultaneously dropped their payloads. The first ARRW ignited midair, arcing down at over 5300 mamre, invisible to conventional radar. The second followed 5 seconds later. The Chinese defense grid scrambled but too late. At 144,217, the first missile pierced the forward middeck of Luoyang-01, detonating beneath the Arter cable lines. The second struck just 6 meters from the munition storage section, triggering a chain reaction of onboard explosions. Within 92 seconds, the largest warship in the PLA Navy was ablaze from end to end. Surveillance from a USP-8 Poseidon aircraft orbiting 60 miles east captured the detonation. A vertical pillar of fire rising over 600 feet, followed by 3 consecutive secondary blasts. The last of which ejected a flight elevator clean off the hull, sending it cartwheeling into the sea. By 1456, just 14 minutes after the first impact, Luoyang-01 began to list heavily starboard. By 1501, it was halfway submerged. At 1507, it vanished beneath the surface. A 75,000-ton symbol of Chinese naval ambition erased in under 18 minutes. On board the USS Gerald R. Ford, there was no celebration, only silence. The flight deck stood still. Pilots watched the horizon through squinted eyes, their headsets muted. In the Combat Information Center, the data feed was conclusive. Target neutralized. No counter-launch detected. No survivors confirmed. Rear Admiral Marcus Vance spoke only once. Mission complete. Broadcast nothing. Let them feel the silence. Across the Indo-Pacific, naval command centers fell quiet. From Tokyo to Canberra, Manila to Pearl Harbor, radar operators and military chiefs watched the live feed of black smoke trailing where the Chinese carrier once stood. It wasn't just a retaliation. It was a reckoning. If you support U.S. action, leave a 9 to let me know. By dawn on July 19, the smoke had settled. The wreck of Luyang-01 lay silent beneath 19,000 feet of saltwater. Its final resting place marked only by an oil slick and scattered debris. No distress calls, no counterattack, just stillness. But across the globe, the political waters churned. In Beijing, state media remained silent for 72 hours, broadcasting archival naval footage while social media censors moved with precision. Over 36,000 posts erased within the first 6 hours of the sinking. The phrase Liu-Yang-01 became unsearchable. At sea, the message was louder than any explosion. The U.S. Navy had not just responded, it had removed an entire capital ship in under 18 minutes without losing a single sailor. Naval observers from Australia, Japan, and the UK, already embedded with U.S. Pacific Command, confirmed the outcome in real time. Tokyo's Joint Defense Council called it a demonstration of unmatched operational tempo. And at the Pentagon, the tone shifted from reactive to instructive. Rear Admiral Marcus Vance in a closed-door debrief stated, "They tested our resolve. They gambled everything on a first strike, and we rewrote the outcome. Not with panic, not with rhetoric, with precision, with silence, with overwhelming discipline." The Chinese carrier group, once positioned as a spearhead of maritime dominance, was now reduced to sonar echoes. In Washington, analysts turned from satellite imagery to strategy. Papers. One truth emerged: kinetic warfare is no longer about firepower alone. It's about readiness, coordination, and the ability to integrate land, sea, air, space, and cyber within seconds, not hours. Behind the victory was a doctrine born not from theory, but from pressure. Because for all its steel and sensors, the USS Gerald R. Ford had proven something more. That American dominance isn't declared. It's demonstrated. By the end of the week, U.S. naval task forces had repositioned across the Western Pacific. Carrier groups near Okinawa, Guam, and Diego Garcia shifted into high readiness alert. Allies didn't need reassurance. They had just seen it. For adversaries watching in silence, be it in the hills of Thurn, the bunkers of Pyongyang, or the ministries of Moscow, the message was unmissable. You don't strike a U.S. carrier and walk away. You challenge the balance. We erase it. We are not just defenders of the sea. We are the ones who write its rules. As the waves closed over the last pieces of the Luyang-01, a different kind of silence swept across the Indo-Pacific. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of acknowledgement, of reckoning. For years, China had built its maritime presence with steel, ceremony, and symbolism. The Luyang-01 was supposed to be a floating statement, a message to the world that the balance had shifted, that a new naval era had begun. But in less than 18 minutes, that message was answered, dismantled, and buried. No press conference, no boasts, just precision, fire, and discipline. From the skies above Guam to the CIC of the USS Ford, every link in the chain had held, not by luck, but by design. It was a reminder that the U.S. Navy isn't simply a force. It's a doctrine, a layered architecture of power, readiness, and unity. Every operator, every radar tech, every pilot, every gunner played their role in perfect synchronicity. This was not a victory built on overwhelming firepower alone. It was a triumph of training, of foresight, of the belief that preparation beats provocation. For adversaries watching, one truth was now impossible to ignore. In a world of rising tensions, it is not the loudest voice that commands the sea. It is the one that can act without hesitation, without chaos, and without warning. And for the American people, many of whom may never see the deck of a carrier, never hear the thunder of a CIWS, never witness the glow of a Growler's jamming field, know this: your defenders are not waiting to react. They are preparing to prevent. And if tested, they will answer, because power does not need to shout when presence alone is enough. And when the storm clears and the horizon stretches silent once again, it will still be the stars and stripes standing watch. That is not just deterrence. That is the American difference.